G'day guys, Luke here. Welcome back to another video. In today's video guys, we're looking at how we set up our baby reptiles once they have hatched. So we just got to look at the family overview of each family of reptile. So it consists of dragons, skinks, geckos, monitors, turtles and pythons. And basically, we're luckily with all our baby reptiles, we can keep them in a very similar way to our adults. Maybe some little tweaks here and there, or maybe more basic, but just an overview of how we keep all our babies in today's video. Luckily here in Australia we've got a whole range of dragon species ranging in different habitats. So once you've had your, breeding pair of dragons have their clutch of eggs, it's a good idea to get everything all ready to set, and that way you're prepared for the babies. Usually you want to make sure there's enough space for all the babies to be housed in. So let's say for example with central bee dragons especially, when they're born, you could have anywhere between 20 to 30 babies on average. Usually I'll go to a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot enclosure to house all those babies in initially. However, if time goes on and if you don't sell the babies as quick as you thought, you might need to get another couple of those enclosures to make sure there's enough space for all these lizards to live in. Because the last thing you want to do is overcrowd these enclosures as well, not providing the essentials that each lizard needs. Unfortunately, it's quite normal to lose a few babies from each clutch that you get. It happens in the wild, it happens in captivity, and it'll happen forever, I guess, as that's just Mother Nature doing her thing. So with dragons, as long as you've got the appropriate enclosure, in the substrate, of course, only other thing really is a water dish. And if there are leafy green eaters like your bearded dragons, you can start giving them leafy greens as soon as possible. However, majority of the baby dragons, I should say, are insectivores. So normally they'll feed insects for the first probably few weeks of their life, and then as time goes on, they'll slowly make the transition over to leafy greens, or if they're just insect eaters, they'll just live off that for the rest of their life, such as your frill-neck lizards. The only dragon species I will say that require a bare bottom tank is your boys forest dragons. Otherwise, every other species I can think of, majority of the time, substrates are fine. So war dragons, beard dragons, netted dragons, all of them, that's fine. Regarding the furniture, depending on the species, all of them do require at least some kind of perching or enough branches in there for all the babies to sit on. Some species like war dragons and netted dragons might need a height or two, or a bigger water bowl, especially with the war dragons. Fake plants don't really use at all, as you don't want your baby lizards eating fake plastic. No backings, pretty much keep it bare as possible is what we do. So it's just easier for the babies to find their insects. So the gap between the eyes is what size insect they'll eat. Most commonly fed off are crickets and woodies. Never give them mealworms to any reptile, because it's actually deadly to reptiles. And superworms are more healthier or better for your reptile. However, they're more for your adults. Funny enough, mealworms are great for your birds, but actually superworms are bad for them, so a little fun fact there. Otherwise, with your bearded dragons or dragons in general, keep them very similar to your adults, however, just don't have as much stuff in their enclosure compared to your adults. So like I said, substrate, food bowl, water bowl, heat and UV, and something to climb on is pretty much the essentials for a little dragon. When it comes to skinks, guys, of course, there's a whole range of skinks we keep, and their status can vary from species to species. Overall, very similar way to your dragons, where you can keep them almost identical to your adults. So let's say if you keep blue tongues in the enclosure, you can keep your baby blue tongues in the enclosure. If you keep your adult blue tongues in tub systems, which I'm personally not a big fan of, but each to their own, you can do that with blue tongues, or with the babies, I should say. So with skinks as a whole, as long as the same thing, got the essentials like heat, UV, a food bowl, water bowl, because babies will eat the same thing as the adults straight away. And side note, some species of skinks are more family orientated, so sometimes the babies do hang around the parents for a little while, such as chinglebacks and the gidgee skinks. As long as they've got places to hide, they've got substrate, pretty much the bare minimum is fine for babies. Yet again, I wouldn't put fake plants with all your leafy green eaters, because you don't want them eating fake plastic plants. That would kill them. But overall, it's pretty much the same thing as the adult. So I'll be honest, skinks overall is quite easy to cover. The next family of reptiles we'll cover off are our geckos. Now I find geckos are commonly kept this way with major breeders with these tub systems. So you have your plastic tub. Towards the back of these shelving units, you have these heat cords or heat pads running along the back, giving the gecko a warm area. Substrates kind of vary from sand to the crocodile fibre depending on what species the breeder has. A couple of hides for the grown-ups to hide into, and a water dish, and they'll feed them the proper size cricket for the most part. So usually gap between the eyes is what size cricket most reptiles will eat, if they're insect eaters. Babies are kept very similar, just in a smaller container. So with baby geckos, they have their heating, which is a heat cord, a heat pad like I mentioned, a hide, water bowl, substrate. And they'll probably get food 3 times a week, like the grown-ups. That way they get a bit more food in them, get a bit more established. However, with geckos, they only have 2 eggs at a time. However, they have multiple clutches throughout the year, so it's kind of a fine balance of keeping the adults on the good weight level, and also keeping the babies alive since they're so small and fragile. I've done it personally here with geckos in the past with knobtails and the spine-tailed geckos. I'll keep them basic and give them the essentials. But overall, geckos are quite similar to blue tongues and dragon steel, where you keep them quite identical. With goannas, being a big range here in Australia, they're all kept slightly different as babies. Of course, you might have very rich salmoners which are going to be that big. Then you have lace salmon babies which are like this big. So the only real difference really is the enclosure as well, depending on what setting you have them in. So let's say with the adults, you have them outside. I wouldn't suggest keeping baby goannas outside for a little while because they could get out, or they're being a small animal, birds of prey and stuff like that could freak them out. So usually we keep them in an indoor enclosure for the time being to raise them up. Diet is more still insect based when they're babies, but as they get older, they might wean off or start eating meat straight away sometimes, like pinky mice, beef, I've heard with some keepers. So diet in a way is very similar to the adults, just the more insect based. Appropriate hides, appropriate heating UV, substrate as well. I find most species of goannas do like to have at least one hide or at least a couple of hiding holes in their enclosure, depending on the species. I do find most goanna babies are quite shy and nervous at first, but over time as they grow up, the more you interact with them, the better they do become. So like I said, it's just provide the essentials for them and they're happy. With turtles, it is a bit of a grey area for me because I don't keep any turtles here at my place. I only work with about 4 species of them where I'm currently at. For me, I find just with turtles as a whole, they can keep them in an identical setup as the adults. Like, don't change anything you've done with the adults. Well, maybe a bare bottom tank, because obviously with babies they might poo and eat more. But however, as long as you do a 20% water change every week at minimum, you got a dock for the little guys to come out. You got the heating UV. You feed them. You can feed them once, twice a week, depending how often you want to feed them and how quickly you want the babies to grow. As well, how much maintenance you want to do on your tank, because the more babies you have, the more food you got to give out, the more often you got to do water changes. And I have heard some species can be a bit more fragile when they're little compared to other species. Such as, for example, I have heard with baby long-necked turtles they're a bit more fragile than your Murray River turtles for some odd reason. I'm not too sure why. But instead that turtles, like I said, keep the same way as the adults. Not going to go much further than that. A very last group of animals we'll cover off are our pythons. Now, with snakes as a whole, they don't really like space at all. From personal experience here and at work, we try to put them in big enclosures to see how they do. Unfortunately, most of the time they get sick, they go off food, or you just never see them out and about. Snakes prefer to be in a tight, secure space. So with babies, usually people keep them in little click-clacks or in those little tub systems, very similar to your geckos in a way. For me here, I've bred the children pythons and central carpet pythons. And what I've done is I use little Chinese containers, of course putting air holes in them. I've got a heat cord running through my shelving unit, so I can just put the babies on that. Paper towel, I usually use a toilet roll or paper towel roll as the hide. When they poo, it's just easy to clean. A little glass candle holder as a water. And I feed them probably every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the species. But saying that, I want to put a baby snake in too big an enclosure. Let's say you got a snake about this big, I want to put them in anything that big. The bigger the enclosure, the worse it's going to be for your baby snake. Usually find, like I said, they're just stressed, don't eat, they'll just cark it. So the smaller, the better for baby snakes. Usually when I feed baby snakes as well, depending on the breeder, some breeders might feed their babies every month. Let's say a pinky to a fuzzy mouse to keep them smaller for longer. For me, I just feed my baby snakes as pinkies every fortnight. So they get fed more frequently, but still a smaller food item just to sustain them and give them what they need. So there's a few variants there with breeders when it comes to baby snakes, how to raise them, how you do it all. But as long as you keep them in a small enclosure and you're providing a hiding hole or a hiding place, they've got heat, water, and you feed them every so often, snakes are fine. They're probably the easiest ones to raise once you get them eating. I do find, depending on species as well, children's are a lot harder to get getting compared to the carpets. I hope blackheads and one pipes are going to be an absolute nightmare. But yeah, it is what it is, I guess. That will be it for today's video, guys. I hope it kind of helps you understand how we keep baby reptiles. All it is really is just keeping it in a basic, smaller version to your adults. That's the long story short of it. If you guys are looking at species-specific videos, in my playlist for my basic setup and care, I have made about, I think, 20 odd videos at this stage. If there is a species that you like to see, stay tuned. I've got another probably 12 coming up the next year, just spacing them out as the series goes on. If you are more into international stuff like ball pythons, chameleons, unfortunately I'm more Australian, and in Australia we're only allowed to keep native animals, so I don't have the knowledge when it comes to exotic wildlife or reptiles. Anything native, I've got about 50, 60 species I can think of. I can at least know how to look after and somewhat breed most of them, as I've been quite fortunate to work with that large array of species here at my workplace. But anyway guys, thank you all for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.